Afro Comic Con 2021. Rewrite the future with us.
Hi, welcome to our panel on how to curate Afrocentric and otherwise Black-centered anthologies and collections. We are very happy to be here for Afro Comic Con, and we want to thank them for putting on this lovely event. This event is put on by a nonprofit, and they rely on your donations in order to continue to put on this wonderful programming. So we would like to ask you to donate to them here online during the event. Thank you. Hi, my name is Sumiko Saulson. We have here with us today Nicole Givens Kurtz, Linda Addison, and Penelope Flynn, all of whom have put together some lovely anthologies and collections. So go ahead and introduce yourselves. Let's start with Nicole.
I'm Nicole Givens Kurtz. I'm the publisher for Mocha Memoirs Press. Our mission is to amplify marginalized voices and speculative fiction that includes science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I'm also a writer. I write science fiction mysteries and horror, weird westerns, and I put together anthologies.
Okay, Linda.
Hi, I'm Linda Addison, and won a lot of Bram Stoker's Lifetime Achievement. SFPA made me Grandmaster end of last year. Not sure what that means, but I like it. And I have also done many anthologies. The one I love to talk about in particular is Sycorax's Daughters, which was the first collection of poetry and stories by Black women. It was not initiated by me, but it was initiated by Professor Kenitra Brooks. And I was one of the 3 Black women editors with that.
And Penelope.
I'm Penelope Flynn. I am the head of Prolific Hybrid Multimedia, which is our overarching entity that publishes, among other things, Blerderotica, and our upcoming Blerderotica 2, which are anthologies regarding Black nerds and our positions on erotica. I also am a writer under Ambitious Hybrid Multimedia. I write the Chronicles of Renfields, which is, my working through many issues, including the concept of being a hybrid, as the Renfields are in my storyline. And it kind of tracks how I'm working through the concept of being African and American. And, as we are African by descent primarily, and also Western European in culture. So it's kind of like my way of working through that in a way that's horror, science fiction, and erotica.
And I'm Sumiko Saulson. I have put together several anthologies, including Black Magic Women and Black Celebration, which was a collection of essays. And some of the people here have been involved with this. As a matter of fact, Mocha Memoirs Press published Black Magic Women. So first question, and anyone who has an answer can, answer it. When you put together your anthologies that are Black-centered, did you put together African Diaspora anthologies, or did you put together African American anthologies, or both? And if so, what were the different challenges that you found with both kinds of anthologies?
Well, I can say for Sycorax's Daughters, as I said, I was one of 3 Black women who put that together. Professor Kenitra Brooks is the one who created the idea. And the other editor was Professor Susanna Morris. And ours was inclusive of everything. I mean, not just American, African-American Black women, but anything that we could pull in and get stories for. And I think one of the challenges was that in general, when other anthologies put out a call and say, we're going to do an anthology on spiders, for instance, then, you know, you get to read like hundreds of submissions and deciding who you want. For us, we had to really go into the Black community in areas that weren't obvious for horror in order to contact authors that I had in particular come across over the years and been, you know, in love with their work, in love with their writing, and say, do you have something that would fit the concept of Black horror, or horror? It didn't have to be Black horror, it really had to just be horror written by Black women. And so what happened with that, and I also looked in places like Essence magazine, at people were writing there, and all the other, I have a whole thing of anthologies here of Black erotica and everything else. And we hit up all of the women that we could find, because it's not the same thing, you know. Now, of course, especially with one of the things you didn't mention, Sumiko, and that is when you did your first book of 60, I think it was 60 Black women in horror, and it's probably like thousands by now. But you know, at the time we were doing Sycorax's Daughters, that was the challenge, was reaching out and finding people to give us the work, because it was not as obvious a market in a sense. But we got so much wonderfulness. I don't even want to talk about that. We can talk about that later.
I definitely think that the hard work that Linda, Dr. Kenitra did, Brooks did, and Susanna did, and Sumiko, you as well, made writing, getting stories for Slay, stories of the Vampire Noire, not as nearly as much work, right? Because I knew people that I could go to and say, I read your work in Sycorax Daughters, or I read your work in Black Magic Women, or right. So there was already, or I seen you on this list, right, that Sumiko has put out. So I was actually able to basically build on the backs of giants, right, to get Slay, to get people to submit to Slay. And it wasn't unusual by that point to have an anthology of just African and African diaspora stories. Like, it just wasn't, because of the work that Linda and them had did beforehand and Sumiko had done beforehand. So with Slay, we did ask and invite everyone from the African diaspora and African Americans to submit. The challenge was getting a diverse group of stories from the continent. That was difficult to get. I couldn't get a lot of vampire slayer stories. I got some, but I would have loved to have had more.
For Blerderotica, the call out was specifically for African Americans, which was any person of African descent in the Americas, you know, going, you know, North America, South America, you know, going all the way through, because I think to some degree, again, you know, I had other people that I discussed the concept with, and there is a difference. There's a cultural difference between those of us who are hybridized, which is what it is, and those who are coming strictly from the continent. And some of the erotica that I had been in touch with from people from the continent, it does not read the same. It doesn't have, not quite as wide open, I don't think. A little bit more, as for women, I very rarely, you know, saw anything pretty much from women, from a woman's perspective, which is kind of, you know, a thing that, you know, I would like to see more women writing from women's perspectives. So yeah, we did Africans in the Americas, you know, just anywhere in the Americas. I mean, in fact, it wasn't even opened up to UK. It was, you know, African Americans. And Blerderotica 2 was more open to, you know, kind of take all comers. But the one that we're really looking forward to is Blerderotica, which is what we're going to be doing next, the Gothic from the, you know, perspective of, you know, people of color, mostly Black people, because I think our experiences are very the same and very different from most other people.
Yeah, with Black Magic Women, the book that people just referred to, 60 Black Women in Horror, had come out. And so I had this idea. I was putting together 100 Black women in horror. And I thought, well, it would be really nice to have a separate companion piece that was horror stories from, women that are in this book. And of course, I'm probably mispronouncing it, but Sycorax's daughters, I think, had come out the year before. So that was already out. And I had just been in a contest called the Next Great Horror Writer Contest, which I ended up being number 6 in, which, okay, technically is placing, but not that high. And when we were in the contest, I was trying to win a book contract and I didn't win, but I noticed that one of the contests that we had was a short story contest that was for Mocha Memoirs Press. And I had this idea, I was like, wow, maybe if I talked to Mocha Memoirs Press, they would be interested in doing this book, Black Magic Women. So I got that, I pitched it and I got that book contract and was very excited. But then I had to do everything very quickly because we had to have it out by February. So I put the call, I think it was like August or something, and I put the call out and I was like all over the place trying to get people to submit stories. And although it was open to people in the African diaspora, just based on the places that I was putting my call out, the vast majority of the people who, put in a story were people who were African American. So it turned out that we had one African writer and the other, I think 18 stories were all African American stories, just because I didn't have as much outreach into African diaspora communities. And it really made me think about this with regular calls for books in different genres. People are always reaching out to different places that they post in that are populated by the people that they usually interact with, which is why there's like this glass ceiling, because you have a whole bunch of, white horror writers that are out there putting out calls in places that only white people really predominantly hang out in. So they get mostly white people back. And that really, made me aware of different other things where I was doing things that were multicultural and diverse, and how much African American contacts dominate my contact list, which isn't a problem if you're doing something that's African American centered. But if I was to do something that was African diaspora, again, I would try to figure out better ways to have communication or contact with people that I was not, in circles with, because, you're in these different convention circles for different African American Black centered conventions, and they have mostly people from this country.
Right.
Okay.
Making inroads into those communities will go a long way towards getting submissions for right outside of just North America or the UK. I like that, Sumiko, very much.
Yeah.
Hi, Linda.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that one of the things that the Horror Writers Association just started 2 years ago, and Sumiko was one of the recipients of the diversity grant. And in 2020, also the other person was, and I'm so sorry, Donald, somebody help me to say his name, from Africa.
It's with an O, but I don't know the rest, thanks.
Oh, I'm looking right at it, but
Okay.
Donald, I'm so sorry, my dear. OGHENECHOVWE, Donald Ekpeki.
Yeah.
But anyway, one of the things that happens when things move in the direction where one person opens doors, like Sumiko did with her 60 women in horror, and then 100, and then gosh knows how many now. And also what happened with Donald is that he just started the first time this year, a year's best of African American or African speculative African speculative fiction. And this is how these things open. right?
Right.
Because,
Yeah.
you know, now we have that book to go to, like all of us went to Sumiko's book, and like other
Yep.
people have gone to my book, not
Mhm.
mine, but, you know, the book that I helped create. So that's, you know, it's a stepping out network, almost web, that brings more people in. So I'm excited about that as a concept.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
So if anybody's watching this and they are thinking about putting together a collection or an anthology, which by the way, Linda was the person who explained to me the difference between an anthology and a collection. I'd like to stop for a minute. Could you explain that to our audience, Linda?
Sure, I'd be happy to, because most people read, they don't think of the distinction, but as a publisher or an editor, you have to be aware of it. An anthology is a collection by different people of work.
Mhm.
A collection is a book with one person's work in it.
Mhm.
So that's the difference. As I said, most readers don't think in terms of a difference between the two. They might be saying Sycorax's daughter's collection because that's how they look at it, is this book with a lot of different pieces in its stories.
Okay, thank you. So if somebody is watching this and they're interested in curating their own collection of Black essays or stories, what would you, as an editor, give them as advice on how to put it together and how to edit it if they're just starting out and they have an idea?
Listen,
Well,
because I
it's-
want to do a collection. I have no idea. Go ahead, I'm listening.
Or
Is
I
it-
thought you was going, I thought you was getting ready to take it. I was like, go, I want to hear.
So is it a collection of their stories, or are they just doing an anthology? We said a collection of their stories, right?
Collection of
So
your
I
own
am so-
or
work.
your own work. So I've actually done
Yeah.
this.
Okay.
So I have it's Sisters of the Wild Sage, a weird Western collection, and it's a collection of my weird Westerns. They
Mhm.
all take, so one of the things, I have a lot of short stories, but one of the things that made this collection thematic, they all are weird Westerns, so they're all in the same subgenre. They all take place in New Mexico, past, present, future, and they're all speculative, weird horror. And so in terms of curating my list of short stories and trying to figure out which stories would go into a weird Western collection, I picked all the ones that were weird. So one of the things is thematic, right? So that's a lot of times with collections, they tend to be thematic or around a theme. Sometimes it doesn't have to be as specific as weird Westerns. It could be around personal growth. It could be around, they can all be stories that are set in the same futuristic setting, right? Like I have another set that I'm working on now. They all take place in my Sybil Lewis universe, but they don't involve Sybil. They all take place in that universe. And it's just a collection of stories of interlocking people that live in the same setting. You think about Milton Davis's The City, it's the same thing. It's a bunch of stories that take place in a similar setting. And so you just have to decide for yourself what type of theme or what type of focus these stories are going to have. They could be, I mean, anything really. So that's what I did. That's what I see in collections like The City or other collections where they have a kind of centralized setting, a centralized theme, or yeah, that's pretty much it. That's what I did.
Let me talk about something that's the opposite of what Nicole just said, because what she said is actually a really good approach when you're putting together something and you have a theme. My collection, How to Recognize the Demon Has Become Your Friend, is almost the opposite in a sense, but what I'm going to say about how I put it together is the same idea that I think you can use for a collection of your own work, or even an anthology of mixed people's, different people's work. And that is that I knew the opening piece was going to be called How to Recognize the Demon Has Become Your Friend. And then the last piece is called How to Recognize a Friend Has Become a Demon. So, and it's a poem, a story, a poem, a story. So in that way, I had that rhythm already decided. But really, when I talk to people about it, I tell them it's science fiction, fantasy, and horror. So how to put it together. Every collection to me is a tapestry that you're putting together like a quilt, right? So if you're designing a tapestry or quilt, before you sew those pieces together, you start putting them in place and seeing, does this one lead to the next one in a way that leads to the next one in a way that leads to the next one, in the pattern of it. Whether anyone reading it ever knows that pattern, they're going to subconsciously know that pattern if they read it from beginning to end. So even if it's the same theme, I feel very strongly that it's important to have a concept of how it's all going from one to the other. Whether that transition is mood, image, you know, like maybe, I mean, this sounds crazy, but roll with me on this one. So if you have a piece that has an image that sort of ends with something that's like an apple, a red, a fruit, a plant, a demon, the next one for me, this is just my way, it's not the only way. The next one, I wanted to have some kind of resonance with that when it starts, right? Whether that red is blood, if it's horror, or if it's something else, some kind of thing that brings that quilt and tapestry so that there's a rhythm and a movement to it. So with How to Recognize a Demon, that really involved, and this is what I did with Sycorax's Daughters. I took the first page of every piece and I laid it out. I have a huge counter usually, or a bed, and I lay them out in the order I think. And then I start not reading everything, but just like, what is this? If this is a ghost theme, do I want a ghost right after that? Or do I want a possession right after that? Or do I, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if this makes any sense. It's really hard. When I've talked to people, it's not something that's easy to define. It really has to do with what Nicole has said, is what is your image and vision for the anthology? And I'm sure Sumiko will say the same thing, because I've read the ones that she's put together. There is a vision there. And sometimes the vision is clear because it's all this theme. And sometimes it's not as clear, but the person reading is going to get a sense of it depending on the order of things, if they decide to read from beginning to end.
Yeah, with my collection, so this is the thing, I've put out 4 collections of my own writing, and then I also put out a collection of various people's essays, which, by the way, is also called a collection because they aren't stories. So it's called a collection because they're essays. With all 4 of the collections that I put together, the writing was writing that was done within a specific period of time. And because of the way my mind and my emotions work, my short stories and poetry for, you know, particular times tend to revolve around the life events that happened in that particular time, whether I want them to or not. So the first book that I put out, Things That Go Bump in My Head, I had just really started my life as, you know, an author. And the things that pushed me out into the world as an author were both of my parents having cancer. So I decided that I wanted to have that writing out in the world while my parents would still be around to read it. And I wrote 3 books. I had 3 novels out before I put out my first collection. And when I put that collection out, I put it out because my father passed away. And when he passed away, I had writer's block. So since I had writer's block, I went back, I got everything that I had previously had published that I had the rights returned back to me, which is something that if you're putting out a collection, you as a writer should be aware of. When you get your short stories published someplace, they give you a contract, which is usually, okay, usually have first publication rights, which means that you cannot put it out into the world before they do. And quite often they'll have a clause in there saying that they have the property for 1 to 2 years, so that you will be holding on to that writing for a year or 2 before you can put it out yourself or republish it. That's pretty common. There are some places that will just have first publishing rights so that it immediately reverts to you. But again, a year or 2 is really common. So I got all those writings, and then I got a bunch of other writing that I had put together that I had not submitted anywhere. That was writing that was very charged with different types of things connected to what I was going through emotionally. So What happens to me is, well, when I first started writing, I kept thinking about different things related to fertility issues because I wanted to have children when I was younger, but I have been unable to have children for a long time. And I went through in vitro fertilization and stuff, and none of it ever worked. So I had all these horror stories that I was writing that were all about different things related to birth. And I didn't intentionally make them all body horror about procreation, but yet that's what it was. So when I'm organizing it, I do organize it in a way to try to make it flow smoothly and to try to make it so that the stories connect from one to another. But a lot of times, is in terms of the theme comes from what I've experienced in the life, in day-to-day life. And then I try to come up with a title that represents that theme. So Within Me, Without Me, which is my most recent publication, came out after my former fiance died and after my mother died. And there's a lot of things in there that are about mental health and different aspects of psychology, as well as my relationship with my mother, who was African American. So my father was Ashkenazi Jewish, and my mother was African American. And we did a lot of things for the culture and for the community together. And I have a lot of feelings connected with her passing that are getting processed. And as a result, there's a lot more about my relationship to Blackness in that particular book than there is in any other previous collection. So that's pretty much it. Yeah. Okay. So Penelope, you didn't feel like answering this particular one because you don't
Listening
have.
to all the knowledge so I can do my collection.
Okay.
Can I just add one more thing then? Since I'm not going to be talking over Penelope, I'm not really trying to do that.
Yeah.
The thing is, what I find when I do every single collection I've done is that the theme isn't always obvious to me or the order. But what my process is, I like to have a printed out 3-ring binder with a fake front and end matter and a fake title and cover and everything, because then I do believe a lot of writing and creativeness is done subconsciously. So then by having something there as a structure, I can start like clay to do it. So what I always tell people is that when you think you want to do something, then you just put something together and you start there. You may take things out, you may put things in, but at least start with, like Sumiko said, start with things that you've written already. And also along the lines of anthologies that have rights with your stories for a year or two. I've always found also that if you decide to reprint it in an anthology of your own, in this collection of your own before that time, usually I have not had one where I didn't contact and say that they were not like, that's fine. You just put in the acknowledgements where it was published before. So.
Okay, that's good to know. I'd never tried that. I always put in the acknowledgements, and I actually keep a list of when the contracts expire so that I know when they come back and I can deal with them. Okay. So another thing that I think that people might want to know about is, okay, when you have these books and you put them out into the world, there's the main, circuit that they have for, I'm going to talk about the convention circuit, in fact. So there's the main convention circuit that has like Worldcon and StokerCon and stuff like that, which is a horror con for those who don't know. And Worldcon is a big sci-fi con, right? But then there's also a bunch of Black conventions out there. Which ones do you go to? Which ones do you recommend people go to? What's a good way for people to promote their anthology or collection once it's out in the world?
Well, I usually hit up, I always keep track in a spreadsheet because I'm a Virgo and I can't help myself. Sorry, not sorry. So I have a spreadsheet of all the places that have either mentioned my work or reviewed my work. And they're always like, they're the places that I think about as far as reviews, blogs, having some kind of acknowledgement, a place in the social media helps. Because then if you're on Twitter, you're on different places and you say, I have a book coming out, or you've been following these places when you didn't have a book come out. This is how you build a list, but you see that they're reviewing books by people that you recognize. And these are the ones that you want to hit up and say, here's my books. The conventions, I always go to StokerCon. That's not one that I have a question going to. I just finished a science fiction thing, so I will start going back to Worldcon again for sci-fi. I go to the ones that are kind of relevant to the kind of work I do. There are also places like here with Afrocon, Comic-Con, where I don't write comics, but the readership is going to still be very interested in speculative writing. So, these are a good place to either follow or go to. There's just a long, long list of conventions out there, but the ones I never miss is StokerCon, Nikon, which is a small convention that only has 200 people, but it's 200 readers, writers, publishers, agent, and it's really like you get a really great sense of being able to sit down with some top people and have conversation. So I think just watching where other people are coming up, perking up with their reviews and stuff, and then sending a little tickler going, I got a new book out, and if you're interested in reviewing it, then I'm happy to give you a copy. I think you have to build a list when you don't need it, if you have it to go to.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. I go to conventions here. I have like my home convention that I go to. I also go to the Outer Dark symposium, right? Which is down in Atlanta or sometimes out in California. It rotates. I try to attend that one as often as I can. I'm going to SuckerCon next year, I think. So it'll be my first time actually going to SuckerCon in person. Yay. But for Slay, we did a lot of, and Penelope, you can keep me honest. We did a lot of podcasts. We did a lot of, I actually got NetGalley I pay NetGalley, right? And so it was really popular on NetGalley. So that was able to get a lot of reviews from people who read horror, just from readers saying, hey, this looks interesting, librarians, teachers, it was really great. We did a lot of panels. We use Continual, which is an online convention. We use Continual, we took over Continual, the whole Slay group, because we had an anthology with a lot of active authors. We had like a Facebook group, and we would continually share opportunities to promote, and then we would all just go crash things. So if we were doing a tour, we would all go take over, and it would be a lot of us. There were 22 authors in Slay. And so not everyone had to carry the load for promotion, right? So if I could make this panel, I made it. If I couldn't, that's okay, because there's 22 of us. And then they were actually able to take it out and submit it to places, say, hey, I'm in this anthology. Do you mind, reviewing it? Yada, yada, yada. So it was definitely a group effort in terms of promotion. And I had some authors who read every single event. But I actually have a promotion matrix in Excel. And we every week up to launch, the last 8 weeks out, I shared it tonight, Penelope. I shared it with the contributors. I said, okay, here are the things you can do 7 days a week, 5 days a week, 3 days a week. And we just kind of we just counted down to the end until it launched. And so it was organized, even though it looked like chaos. It was organized chaos in terms of promotion. And that really helped generate a lot of buzz about Slay. We had a teaser trailer for Slay done up. So we shared that around. And so teaser trailer on the Mocha Memoirs website, we shared it in the group. Getting your contributors in your anthology to help promote was really great. Having a group with just the contributors also helps. I know that Milton Davis does that. I know that another Croon Girls Press does that. Like they just have a grouping of people that are in that anthology so that they can work together to promote and make that work as successful as they can. And that's a really nice nice promotional tool as well.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying about the people in the anthology, because with Black Magic Women, every time I would go look on Amazon to see if it was going up the charts, and every time it did, and I would post it and I would tag the people that were in it, like on Facebook, because that was back when I didn't promote everywhere else as much, but yeah, and Twitter also. And like I'd tag them and then I'd turn around and they'd have posted it everywhere. And then I'd go back and look and it would be back up there. And that's how it became the #1 horror anthology on Amazon.
Yeah. And it continues to sell. Like it's just brilliant. I also want to note the importance of cover art. I know we haven't talked about that a lot, but I have got to say that Tara Reid's cover for Slay was as much a seller as anything else. Like it just appeared in the Washington Post just this week, and it's been out a year already. And it's the cover that is so jaw-dropping stunning that you have to go, wow, I need to look at this. And so your artwork, I mean, the stories inside have to be worth it, right? But the eye-catching piece of a great cover cannot be understated.
And I think that even when people were submitting stories to Slay, I think that a lot of people saw that and they're like, oh, I need to be in that anthology. For real.
Yeah. No. I think for my stuff, it was harder for me in a way when I started because I was writing erotica. And, you know, I had a story like in one of Zane's books, you know, years back. And, you know, it's kind of like the stuff, and I mean, Renfield's that I do is a lot of erotic content. And so like I sent it to my sister, you know, whose opinion I absolutely take, you know, into consideration. And she's like, nice story, but does it have to be so much sex? And I mean, that shut me down. That shut me down for about 3 years that I didn't write. And finally my husband was the one that said, look, would you read this book? Is this the book that you want to read? I said, you can't write for everybody. You just write for the people that are like you that want to read it. So I think that was, you know, that thing that got me out, you know, writing again. But then after that, it's like, how do you find the people who are reading erotica and not just reading erotica, but Black focused, you know, erotica, because my main characters are Black people, you know, I mean, it is a diverse group of people, many different people from, you know, if you look at the, you know, the picture of what my Renfield's, my Renfield's Alpha, that's just, you know, a complete diverse rainbow of people. But my main character is a Black woman, you know, the head of the clan is another Black woman who is her mother. And, you know, the children, of course, are of diverse heritage because they have 2 different fathers. But, you know, how do you get to your group of people that says, yeah, I want to read something like that? So that took me a while to basically have like I had to go to who do you write like? Say, so it has to be, if you enjoyed Anne Rice, you know, and then you're going to enjoy this, you know, so that pitch of you. So I'm finding people who like vampires. I'm finding people who like the mix between, because mine is sci-fi and horror and erotica mixed all together. So the people who like that kind of mix, people who might be brought in because of the erotic bent, and then, you know, kind of catch on to the other things. So that was the hardest for me, you know, trying to find, you know, where do you find it? And basically it was that. If you loved Anne Rice, then you will love this, because she is the person who basically wrote more in line with what I wrote. But, you know, I have more diverse, more Black women point of view oriented kind of storyline. But I mean, I have, you know, white male storyline. The first book is regarding Koyescu, and he was a revenant. But he's not, it's just like Superman is not a white person. My revenant is not a white person because he's not from here. He's from another dimension. So he may present as someone who would mix in, but he's not. But they all have their background. And I think that was the thing for me, having to find the group of people who read the things that were like the thing I wrote. And it took me, I'm ashamed to say, 2 years to figure that out. 2 years to figure it out. And once I did though, it became easier. But before I was just floundering. I really was, trying to, where do I go? And especially because in fact, reviews are hard for me because I find a lot of Black people don't like to give reviews on erotica. I found this to be a thing. I asked them, why didn't you give a review? You bought the book, why didn't you review it? Well, it's got a lot of sex in it, Yeah. So that's the other issue. It's like trying to get people in the demographic that I really want to read it to actually review it.
Can I just add something real quick, Sumiko? So now what crossed my mind, Penelope, is now people don't have to go through what you went through. They can be like, and my book is, if you liked what Penelope Flynn did, then you're gonna like my book. See, that's how it is when you do something different and then you break through. Everybody else can slide in after.
That's right. That's right.
Maurice Brodus calls it holding the door open, right? So that other people can slide in, so others can slide in. And the door that was originally shut, right? Penelope, you opened it, right? You shouldered it open. It took you 2 years, but you got it open.
Yeah.
And so now others, as Linda was saying, can come through that door behind you and have less work because that door is already open because you broke it open for them. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's what Linda did for us. Like Linda did that work for us, that hard work and horror for Black women. And she did that. She opened that door for us. She didn't just go through it and let it slam behind her. That makes me so mad. You know how you're going into a store, and this is before automatic doors. I'm definitely dating myself. And you're like rushing to get through the open door, and it shuts just as you get there. Yeah. Linda doesn't do that work. She holds the door wide open and says, hey, you coming too? And that's just very welcoming and very a sense of, okay, I do belong in this space. And so Linda did that work for us.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
Yes.
It's true. But yeah, that's great, Penelope. That's exactly what you did.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm going to tell you, erotica wise, that I have to say, Sumiko is, she doesn't play. I mean, she puts it out there.
She does.
She does. Then the rest of us who are writing,
same thing. She another one kicking indoors. Don't care.
They do.
We don't feel self-conscious. We're like, oh well, I can get out there and do that thing too. Well, yeah. So she's out there. I'm gonna go too.
Exactly.
Hey, my pronouns they though.
They, yeah.
They.
I'm sorry.
I fixed it.
That's okay. They.
Sumiko heard me say they do.
I know. I did.
Yeah. So you said Multiverse Con, you had to wear your pronouns button. So
You did.
Yeah.
Talk about a good con. I mean, it's right in Atlanta. So if you're in the Atlanta area and you're watching this, I know. But they take inclusion from the top down. It's not a tacked on piece. It is integrated into everything they do, from volunteers to programming to programming directors, from track directors, it is not just, these panels are not surface panelists. There's a whole learn track where people present their academic papers on fandom, on horror, on science fiction, and deep, meaningful topics. It is they have like a whole meet track just for people to meet each other. In particular, if you're a veteran, right? Here's a meeting for all veterans to get together and talk about your fandoms. It is a very inclusive, inviting convention that takes inclusiveness in being a safe space for fandom, all fandoms, because L. Marie Wood runs the horror track. Seriously, in ways that I have never seen at any convention. And y'all, I go to a lot of cons.
FireCon too.
FireCon. Yes, FireCon is another one.
Yes, they just started a con. I think last year was their first year.
Yeah, this year was too.
Same thing, very inclusive, very great mix of, people just getting in as creators, people who've been there as creators, people who are enjoying the creation. It was there's a lot of growing things like this. Sumiko knows I had a good time at the beginning of 2020 at her con, and then everything shut down after that. That was my last in-person con.
Yeah, things are opening back up, but it took a while. I just want to mention one thing too, which is, Sheree Thomas pretty much kicked off a whole launch to see of anthologies, because a lot of people really before Dark Matter, or is it Dark Matters? I always get confused.
Yes,
It's Dark Matter. It was Dark Matter. Yeah.
Yes, because I was in Dark Matter 1. Nobody knew I was Black until I was in that book.
Yeah.
But
before that, there were this was not really a thing, and now there's a bunch of them out there.
Yes,
yeah,
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
She's like the queen.
She is.
You're the queen, and now she's doing this.
Yes. I was lucky enough to get her to be in Slay, and I felt like
best.
You guys should have seen me running around my house. I'm like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. She said yes, she said yes, she said yes. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Like my husband's like, what is wrong with you?
The opening story in Sycorax's Daughters.
I had to shake her.
Yeah,
you know, just said yes to my anthology. Yeah, she is phenomenal.
Yep, to recognize. So we are now at the end of the program. We got about 10 more minutes. So if there's any last things that you feel that you would like people to know before we close this, and also let people know where they can, find you on your social medias and stuff like that.
Well, I was just going to say, you can find me on my anywhere under Linda Addison or Nightbird, NYTE. But I mean, if you look up Linda Addison, you'll find me. And my site is Linda Addison Writer altogether.com.
I want to say that if there's a collection or an anthology that speaks to your heart, or an anthology that you haven't seen done yet, and you want to do it or you want to see it, do it. Right. There's lots of reach out to us. I'm sure we're all on Twitter. A lot of us are on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, you can find our emails. Just reach out to us if you feel like you need guidance or support, because just because it isn't out there, it doesn't mean there's not a need for it or a want for it. So people don't know what they want, so it's actually available to them. Like, hey, I didn't know I need this in my life. I'm Nicole Givens Kurtz again. I run Mocha Memoirs Press. You can find me at mochamemoirspress.com, or you can find me at NicoleGivensKurtz.net.
Penelope Flynn, and you can find me at penelopeflynn.com. If you want to email me, it's penelope@penelopeflynn.com. I'm on Twitter, Facebook. Every now and then you'll see me lurking on Instagram. Okay, I'm going to do a bad commercial right now. The issue with Instagram is that one person indicated that you have all these different platforms and you get X amount of percentage or whatever for putting out your content. But Instagram is the only place where you are creating content and you don't get paid. So always remember that you're putting out your content on Instagram and you are not getting paid for it. So, there you go. Okay. If you are into erotica, you have an idea for an erotica anthology that I haven't thought of, our next one, Blerderotica 2, is subtitled Couples Therapy. So it will be all about, 2 or more people involved in a relationship, and how it is that they all meet with their therapist to determine how to resolve whatever their issue is. So look out for Couples Therapy. I also have coming out the second book of Ramona, which is the third book of the Chronicles of Renfields. And also I have next year, 2022, and this is a book a story, the opening of, I actually premiered at the LGBTQA, the San Francisco group with Sumiko Saulson and Cal, and that is the Shabokaran Canticle, and the beginning of it comes the goddess, and that is going to be done as a novel and also an illustrated novel in 2022.
So I'm Sumiko Saulson. My website is sumikosaulson.com. That's SUMIKOSAULSON.com. I write a column for the San Francisco Bayview called Writing While Black, which is about being African American on the convention circuit. And if you are an author and you have anything that you want to talk to, people about in my column, just actually send me an email, sumikoska@yahoo.com, and say, hey, I have this book event coming up and I want to talk about it in the Bayview. And I don't do reviews, that's Wanda. Not me. But if you have an event, I will plug your event in my column. Just let me know. On social media, I am Sumiko SKA. That's Sumiko Ska. Pretty much everywhere. Facebook. I'm on TikTok. Instagram's the only place. I'm Sumiko Saulson because I logged on with my other one and got locked out of it. But yeah, Sumiko SKA on like Twitter and all those other places. Thank you very much for being here tonight. And once again, please do support Afro Comic Con. They are a nonprofit that puts this on every year, and they need your financial support to continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being such a great host and asking. I'm delighted to be amongst you all.
Wow.
Thank you. Okay.